Hi there, and a very warm welcome to this week's video, in which we are continuing a series, which is the Diamond series. Of course, over the years I got a lot of mails regarding one question about this series, and this is how to separate the lighting for the metal parts and the gemstone parts. And when I was thinking about it, I noticed that I actually never gone over light linking in Octane in one singular video. So this is what we are going to do today. So let's grab your coffee and let's engage. Get it? And as always, let's have a look what we are going to do today. So we are going to light this scene today. We don't care about the assets as well as the materials. I have other videos for that. If you want to have a play around with the scene, you can download it on my Patreon. The lowest tier will suffice. And today is something new because this is a little bit unorthodox for my usual practices, as we're going full productivist mode and don't care about photorealism as cramming lights in between the ring, for example. So now let's head over to our unlit scene. And welcome to our starter scene. Let's light this. As you can see, it's black right now. And we have those render settings. If you're interested, we are using path tracing and those very standard settings below. One of the best ways to get started, at least in my opinion, is with some HDRIs. So let's do this by going to Object and then go with HDRI Environment. What I'm going to do here is drag in a Studio HDRI as we have this one here, and it should show up here. Here we go. As we see our first image, this is a good point to mention that we are using ACES. So if I untick that, you can see it's a lot less contrast and it would be even too dark. So I raise the exposure to 1.5. Let's make our background black to have more creative control. So right now you're seeing the HDRI, which we don't want. We want to have our gradient in the end here. So what we need to do is duplicate our HDRI. Then go to the HDRI settings, set it to RGB spectrum, make this black, and last but not least, set it from primary environment to visible environment. Here we go. And there we are, all done. Thanks for watching. Of course not. Let's tidy up our HDRIs a bit and actually call one HDRI and the other one background, BG. So the plan is to use the HDRI for the scene lighting as well as the metal parts of the ring, and then use a different lighting set with light linking for our gemstone. So let's do with HDRIs what we usually do with them, and this is turning them around and find a spot where they look good. So for example here, and maybe I want to actually go to the rotation Y and also apply a little bit of a correction here too. As you know me, I like straight values, so 0.45 and 0.12. should suffice. Before we finish up with our HDRI, there's one thing I want to do, and this is increase the contrast. Now you could open up the HDRI in Photoshop and do this, but we can also use the nodes. First, my new favorite thing to do with the nodes is turn on snapping, because I really like those straight and tidied up trees. Next, let's find the contrast, which hides in a color correction node, so let's noodle this in here. And then let's actually turn up the contrast. Here we go. This is the contrast. So if we increase that, the darker part should get darker, as you can see here. I already know the value that I'm going to use. It's 1.75. Here we go. You might have noticed that our HDRI now ignores our rotation values. So if we go ahead and jump over the correction, you can see this is what we actually dialed in. So the disadvantage here is that if we use any more nodes than just the HDRI, then our rotation is lost, but not all is lost here. Because as always, there of course is a workaround. In this case is we go to our HDRI and use a UV transform, and in there the transform values here. So if we just match the transform values of our original transform, here we go, you can see it's matching perfectly. Very nice. And that already concludes our HDRI part. In the next part we are going to touch up the metal, because in some areas here it looks very dark. Welcome to our metal lighting and touch-up chapter. What we are going to do next is place some small area lights to light up portions of the metal that are right now very dark. To be able to better position our lights, what I want to do is create a null with the same orientation than the ring. So let's select the ring and then by shift clicking and creating a null, make it the same orientation here. So let's drag it out and then we can close our folders again. And now we have this null in the same orientation. Let's call the null metal lighting, and then what we're going to do is make a light inside of it. So we are going to Objects, Octane Light, then hold down Shift and create an area light. And if this didn't work, then just drag it in here and zero it out. You have this button here, or in the coordinate system, the Reset Transform. Let's go outside of the camera for a second and see what we've done here. And you can see we have a very large area light now. As we only want to add some light spots to the lower part of the dark ring here, we don't need this large of a light, so let's make it 20 times smaller by going with 10 by 10 millimeters. And by the way, if you're asking yourself why I can actually set my values as millimeters and not the Cinema 4D default, which is centimeters, this has to do with the scenes I'm usually working with. So I work with very small scenes usually. So I go to units and set it to millimeters, and that's the whole shebang. Now let's go back inside of our camera so we can see what we're doing. Now moving the lights around obviously can take quite a bit of time in figuring out where you want them. I have a little bit of an advantage here as I did this before. And as almost always, there are a couple of tweaks we need to do. For example, the most obvious one is that the light itself is visible in the shot. So let's go to the tag here and make the opacity 0. Actually, let's go on a very small tangent here and discuss the opacity of the light, because it can be of advantage even if your light is not visible directly in your scene. So if I set the opacity back to 1 for a second, you can see that two things are happening. One, now the light is casting shadow into the scene. And two, obviously the backside of the light is reflected in the scene. And setting the opacity to 0, which makes it invisible, is also not casting shadow and handling reflections additively. So everything behind the light source is let through for reflections. Now back to topic, or back to tweaking. We want to make this look nice. So if we look at it, it's much too bright. So let's go to the power and set it back to 1. Now the brightness is sort of okay. We might tweak this later on. But this light has very harsh edges, so what we want to do is set the brightness with a gradient. To do this, we are going into the lights nodes and then generate a gradient. I already typed that in, so gradient generator, and then plug it into the texture here. To see what we are doing, let's actually make the light visible again, go outside of the camera and zoom in here. And then what we want to do is go with a radial light type and do some more tweaks. Alrighty, off to more tweaking. So first of all, let's take the gamma to a linear value of 1. Then turn off the repetition here by a white value. And last but not least, let's go and invert it. Now we have a nice smooth light. Now for the fun of it and to increase the art directability, we can noodle a octane gradient inside of the flow here, which lets us remap some values, so we can really art direct our values here. I already have done that, so I know that I need a value of 25 in the white portion that squishes the gradient to the outer part. Let's have a look what this looks like inside of our camera, and don't forget to make the light invisible again. So for me, this is a little bit hot, so what I'm going to do is set this to 0.25. And then move the light maybe a little bit back and a little bit to the side. Something like that. If you have good memory, in the beginning of the video I showed you 3 lights here, and this is what I'm going to do behind the scenes now. So I'm just duplicating the lights to be visible here and also on this side, and then start recording again. Alrighty, welcome back. So only a couple of seconds for you, a couple of minutes for me. And we have done our lighting part here. So you can see now we have some nice gradients on the lower side of the metal. Now it's also the time to apply light linking for the first time here. So to show this off a little bit better, let's make those lights a little bit more hot again and then leave the camera. And you can see now those lights are not only lighting the ring, but also the rock, which we don't want. I hope you don't mind following me on another side tangent. And this is about those black artifacts you see at the intersection point of the rock and the light. I tackled this in another video called Ray Epsilon, and this is exactly what we're doing here. For scenes with a smaller scale such as this, it's usually the rule of thumb to have 4 digits here, so 4 zeros and then 1 leading 1. And this, as you can see, almost gets rid of the artifacts. Now, let's carry on with our light linking. The way this works is with light IDs, you can find those down here, and with Octane object tags. Since we want to control the rock, let's give it 1 and go to extensions, Octane and Octane object tag. Here we go. We could easily use light ID 1 that is registered in the lights in here right now, but usually I use that for scene lighting, so I go up in 5-step increments. So let's start with number 5. To make this all work, let's go down to our rock and its tag, and then go to object layer, and actually we have to enable the use light path mask here. So let's enable it, and here you can see we have access to all of those IDs, including 2 extra ones. So S stands for sunlight system and E stands for environment. And now to the easy part about light linking. So we have the light IDs 5, and we don't want to show those lights on our rock, which has the tag. So if we untick number 5, then they're just gone. Easy as that. And now, welcome to the part you all have been waiting for. At least if you do jewelry and you always wondered how to separate the lighting for the diamond and the metal. But those tricks are nice to know for everyone, so let's stay tuned and keep watching. But first of all, a big caveat. I know from other jewelry artists that the go-to way to do this is to just link another HDRI to the diamond. And in Octane, this is just not possible. You only ever have one HDRI at your disposal. So Otoy, if you're listening, please let us have more than one HDRI to light link. To get the separate lighting going for our diamond, despite the fact we cannot use extra HDRIs for it, we need to do it the traditional way with just lighting, so some area lights. To get this going, we need 2 steps. Step 1 is to exclude all the lighting from the diamond that already exists in the scene, and therefore we need a Octane object tag on the diamond. So let's find the diamond, right click, and then go to the extensions and Octane object tag, and of course enable this option here again. If there's not a lot of lighting changes that you want to do later on in terms of IDs that you give your lights, we know exactly what light IDs to turn off, which is the environment and then the light ID 5. You can still see some sparkliness in here, and this is indirect light from the scene, so light that bounced off of some object and then refracted into the diamond. If you decide later on to change your lighting with different light IDs, then you have to be careful to not make them visible inside of the diamond, unless you intend so. So what I'm usually doing is to turn off all of the IDs, and this can take a while. Here we go. So staying true to myself, going into 5-step increments, I'm going to use the number 10 for the diamond light. So let's actually go and make a light here. So objects, lights, and then area light. Let's make the ID for this light 10. And you can see now it is recognized by the diamond. Obviously, again, we need to do some tweaking. So what we need to do is make the light a little bit darker, so maybe 5, and then rotate it and put it in front of the diamond. Something like that. So if we go back to our camera, let's see what this looks like. Obviously, the light right now is hiding the camera view, so what we need to do here too is make it invisible. Here we go. Now, this light not only lights the diamond, but the rest of the scene. You can, for example, see that on the rock that is much brighter than before. This can be beneficial, but this is not what we need right now. We want to have this light solely for our diamond. So going by the way we learned before, we need to apply a Octane object tag to every object other than the diamond in the scene and then exclude the number 10, the light ID, from that object. And of course, I'm saying it in that way because there's a faster way to do that. Because if you have scenes with a lot of objects, then this might be very tedious. And this is where the light ID section in the render settings comes into play. So to not give every object a Octane object tag, the workaround is to use the light linking invert here. So we can invert the ID we tick. So if we tick 10, then all the objects are inverted, so none of them receive the light 10, including the diamond. And since everything is inverted, we also need to invert our selection here. So by ticking off number 10, we get the light showing up in our diamond as intended. Now what you can do is the same thing that we did with our reflection light. So let's actually steal one of those gradients and put it into our diamond light. Here we go. And what we actually want to do here is, instead of a radial texture, let's go with a linear one. And then maybe it's a little bit hot still, so let's go with a value of 2.5. And you can really tweak that as you like. As mentioned in the beginning, and as with most of my tutorials, this is based on a request. So hint hint, put requests everywhere I can find them, with the chance of me making your tutorial. But this is actually not what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that the reference in this request had a diamond with some sparkles in a different color. So to do that, we need yet another light for the diamond. Let's go outside of our camera and do this by just duplicating the light here and then make it a little bit smaller, so maybe 50 by 50, and then go back inside of the camera here. Then turn off the main light so we can only see the sparkles from our other light for now. Let's go and show the nodes for this light. To get in some color while keeping the gradient, we can go with a multiply here. Here we go, and then disable the preview as we don't need it. And then scroll up here and go with an RGB spectrum. In the RGB spectrum, let's choose a cyan color, so 200, and maybe a saturation of 25. So we get slightly blue tinted sparkles. Alright, let's tweak this a little bit. So what I want to do first is actually make the light a little bit brighter to get more sparkliness out of it. So let's actually go with a value of 15. And this is looking quite nice already, but it loses a little bit of saturation. So let's actually increase the saturation to 50 here. What we of course can also do is move our light around and see where it looks the best. And this is part of the tweaking. So I think 20 to 25 looks very sparkly. And then what we can do is go to our main light, main diamond light, I mean, and turn this on. Now this overpowers our nice sparkliness. So I want to go here and make it even more dim, maybe 1.5. Here we go. And of course you can tweak it to your heart's content. I think for the short time we had here, this is a rather good result. And last but not least, let's go and make this a little bit more tidy by naming the lights here, diamond 1 and 2, and then put them into a null object, which we are calling diamond lighting. Here we go. Alrighty, it is bonus time, so if you cannot keep your hands off extra HDRIs, and you really want to have an extra HDRI for your gemstones in your image, then we can use the before mentioned workflow with a sphere light. So let's get our hands dirty. To a huge surprise, the most obvious thing happens and we are going to make a sphere here. Then we tweak the sphere, so make it a little bit smaller, and also make a hemisphere. Then move it into the directory where the orientation of our ring is applied. Then go to Reset Transform and move it up around 20 millimeters. Here we go. Let's go into another camera and look at it. And this is what we are starting with. Next, with the sphere still active, hit C to convert it into polygons. Then select all and invert the normals, since we want the light to appear inside, not outside. Let's create a new Octane diffuse material, call it HDRI. And then go inside of the material here. Inside of the material, go to diffuse and turn it black, so 0. Then go to emission and create a texture emission. Here we go. Let's assign the material and we can see, yes, we have some lighting going on. To get rid of the overexposure, we just need a power of 1 and then surface brightness ticked. Don't worry, this light gets brighter if we bring in some HDRI. So let's do this next by dragging in your favorite diamond gem HDRI and plug it into your texture. Now, this is a Gamma 2.2 as it's loaded, but HDRIs should always be loaded as Gamma 1. So here we go. Let's finish this up with the last couple of settings. So first of all, what I want to do is go and set the light pass ID to 10 to not light the rest of the scene but the diamond. Then we can go into our camera and see nothing because the backside of the sphere is black. To change our opacity, since we are not working in our light tag, we need to go to our material and set the opacity here to 0. Now this also turns off our HDRI unless we go back to our light tag and enable transparent emission. Here we go. Now we have a HDRI showing up in our diamond. And last but not least, to have the real HDRI feeling, what you can do is go to a projection and set projection to the spherical one. So now when you rotate the HDRI around, you can find the perfect spot for the diamond to reflect. Hold on 1 minute. I almost forgot one key ingredient to the main render. And this is the gradient here in the back. You can do that with a background texture, but what I used is just a light source yet again. So I'm going to be a bit cheap and just copy this light source here inside of our camera, zero it out, move it to 1000 and then make it a lot bigger, namely 250 by 250, rotate it around 180 degrees. Actually make it visible now. Here we go. And now we are almost there. Last thing we need to do is go to the nodes here and set this one to the far right and then go down and 225. Here we go. So we added another thing to tweak to our blade of tweakable items, so you can do that to your heart's content. Again, this scene is available on my Patreon if you want to tweak around. And this concludes this week's video. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. At least I tried to squeeze in a lot of things that I usually use in my day-to-day workflow. As you might have noticed, this is the 99th episode, so I'm still not sure what to do for my 100th. Maybe some Q&A session again. If you have any ideas, let me know down in the comments below. And now, let's thank those people who made this video possible. Of course, my Patreons. Especially my €50 tier subscribers, Shields Augustinen, Just a Frickin', and Leon Studio TV. Also, of course, a huge thank you for my €15 tier subscribers, for Die Thieves, Render King, Alessandro Bonchio, Alessio De Vecchi, Andrew Niehaus, BVR, Chris Fritchie, Christian Grajewski, DBMD, Erbe Plus Academy, George Luna, Graham Bucknell, Joel Muckemer, John Edward, Ludger, Muradan Axos, Nico Straub, Part 1 of 2, Kwok An Dang, Ralf, Random Capybara, Raiko, Renato Marquez, Reshock, Shamus Johnson, Shiro 2049, Terry Wayne Ranson, and Yassin Rupp. Thank you all so very much for making it possible to produce those videos that you all enjoy. Welcome to the after show party, you light linkerers and tinkerers. As always, thank you so very much for staying with me and listening for that long. If you want to show your support, let's post a last quarter moon in the comments down below. It should symbolize two different lighting situations as well as an HDRI if you squint your eyes. Other than that, also as always, have a great rest of the weekend, a fantastic start into next week, and a simply awesome time. Cheers and happy HDRI turning. Bye!